Hello class, this is my video summarizing the case study number 2 about Polaris Incorporated. So the first question of this case study is talking about why some companies outsource their labor and assembly versus doing everything in-house. So first we're asking about Polaris. Why do they outsource some of their components but keep their assembly in-house? And it's interesting because Polaris is considers themselves a made in America company, but they have over 450 global suppliers for all of their parts and components, and 40% of those components are actually being procured from outside the United States. But by claiming or by keeping the assembly in America and in-house, they're able to continue to call it an American-made product, which people take pride in and gives them some social capital. Also, the main reason why Polaris would want to do this would be to give them access to economies of scale. So by allowing uh, suppliers to fill the gaps for them by providing them their parts and components, they're able to utilize the surplus that's created in the supply chain from another company's manufacturing process, which has already been refined and created efficiency gains over the years, which is now allowing Polaris to have access to that rather than trying to do everything themselves. It also allows them to access these suppliers who are highly specialized, who have been probably producing these parts and components for years. So they're able to procure a high quality product for a low cost, which would be a driving factor for why they would want to do this. It also allows them to keep their assembly and design process in-house so that they can have better quality control over the finished product while still procuring high quality individual components from their suppliers. And the other question is, why do some companies vertically integrate everything? I would consider this to be a way to fiercely control quality. So by having all aspects of your finished product being manufactured in-house, you have a lot more visibility and a lot better communication and upholding to specifications and standards that you want to see in your product rather than outsourcing things. So you are able to really get a better handle on your quality control. You're also able to create some competitive advantages by potentially differentiating your product from the rest of the market. So if you're able to create a new innovation or a different way that your parts of your machine fit together, or the way that they're designed that other companies and products aren't able to achieve, the efficiency or quality gains you can get from that can create a competitive advantage for your company and make you more profitable. It also basically just increases the efficiency of the supply chain simply because all of the components of your manufacturing are under, essentially one roof or one roof of one company, so that you can cut down on gaps in communications or gaps in the supply chain over time to then keep your lead times down and keep rapid delivery to your customers. And then also it creates potentially portfolio some diversification for the parent company, because if they're manufacturing parts for their machines while also building the machines, they could potentially have other revenue streams by selling some of those parts that maybe aren't proprietary to the machine to other companies. So they become not only a manufacturer but also a supplier. So can kind of help diversify their portfolio. So the next question is trying to elaborate on the calculations to decide whether or not to outsource for Polaris. So um, from my calculations, you can see my finished numbers at the bottom. Uh, it, the decision that was most cost effective would be to move manufacturing to Mexico. So Mexico was actually offering about $6 million dollars in net present value cost savings versus manufacturing in the United States. And then China actually is exceeding the net present value of the United States manufacturing due to several things that I'll get into on the next slide. So there were several key points to driving us to the decision to manufacture in Mexico rather than China or the United States, and I wanted to highlight some of them. It's difficult, obviously, to go through an Excel sheet, a short video, so I just wanted to highlight the main points for how I got to my finished numbers. So the first is that I calculated the exchange rate for China and Mexico. I projected them for 2011 through 2015 by using a linear forecast from 2005 through 2010. And based on the Zoom video, I wasn't able to attend the Zoom meeting, but I got to watch it, and it looks like that's what everyone else was doing in that video as well. But I did a few things different than what we were talked about in that video, so I want to talk about those. Maybe right, maybe wrong, but I'll explain what I was doing. So the second point is that the production costs I calculated also using the varying exchange rate rather than a fixed exchange rate. I think it gave us an option to just utilize a fixed number, but I utilized the varying numbers that I talked about there with my first point to calculate the production costs. And you can see the production costs changing for Mexico and China and below in year one and year two. The third point was that I also calculated the labor costs using not only the rising average monthly pay, but also, once again, the varying exchange rate rather than using a fixed rate for the exchange between Mexican pesos and Chinese yen. So, firstly, for the monthly pay increase for Mexico, I took a average of the wage increases from 2002 to 2008, and I excluded 2000 and 2001 due to them being super high outliers, which really skewed the data. I think it was 20% and 15% or something like that, and then all of the rest of the years were 3% or 4 or 5%. So I excluded those first 2 years and try to utilize a little bit more of the recent data to create an average for the pay increase rate. And then for part B there, the monthly pay increase for China, I just used an average from 2000 to 2008 because it seemed to be a more normal data set. And then the fourth point, I calculated the tariffs for Chinese production over 2011, 2015 by once again including the rising production costs and not a fixed production cost. You can see the tariffs are increasing for China in the bottom there. So the third question was asking us to perform a sensitivity analysis. So you can do this for a variety of the variables that are being changed in that Excel file. But I decided just to highlight 3 things that I did here. First was varying the production cost in Mexico, because I was curious if there were to be some sort of spike in the costs due to labor or procurement or any sort of other issue, at what point would it then become more profitable just to manufacture in the United States? So the production costs in Mexico would actually have to increase by 39% from the current cost in order to make the United States more cost effective. The second point I looked at was the transportation costs between the United States and Mexico. So obviously gas prices and transportation costs can be super variable. So I wanted to see how that would change. And actually, if the cost per truck per mile were to increase from $2.30 up to $5.30, then China would then become more cost effective than Mexico or the United States, just due to the changes in the just driving the trucks across the country versus in China the shipping costs. So I guess it's not necessarily true, as probably the Chinese shipping costs would also change if this were happening, but just for the sake of this argument, I changed the transportation costs. And the third thing I looked at was the wage growth reduction rate in China. I'm sorry, the wage growth rate, and how, if it was reduced, how that would potentially change this. And so even if the wage growth from 2009 to 2015 was less than 1%, let's say the Chinese economy became completely stagnant, Mexico would still be more cost effective, which I thought was actually pretty interesting. So yeah, some of these things more sensitive than others, but it gives some good insight. And the last question was about what other qualitative factors should Polaris be considering as they're making their decision. So obviously there's a lot of different things that go into all decisions in the supply chain, but specifically for this, some of the factors include economics, risks, or other strategic factors as far as how do you want to run your business, and they should all be included when you consider the total cost of ownership or the net present value of an investment. So the first thing will be uncertainty. So if the geopolitical landscape were to change, the supply chain from outsourcing can become fractured very quickly, which we saw very easily with the COVID pandemic. Also communication, so controlling your processes can become much more difficult when you experience language barriers and cultural differences. And lastly, just your reputation. So you can experience some negative social capital in the United States if you outsource and the public finds out that you're moving your manufacturing somewhere else.